you very much. Thank you so much
Okay.
for being here. And yeah, okay. So we are gonna get started. First, before we start, I just want to know who is here. So if you can put in the chat where you're from, I would love to know where everybody is from. That would be amazing. Hi, Tammy. What's up? What's up, Sherry? Susie, just type in the chat real quick so we know where everybody is from all around the world. And welcome to Woodstock Wednesdays. We've only been doing this. This is the second time only, so you haven't missed much. We're gonna make some announcements tonight, but before I make any announcements, I have Ann Osbourne here, so I don't want to make the announcements until later, because Ann's time is very precious and valuable. And so, if you guys, while we're typing in the chat where we're from, okay, if you guys have any questions for Ann, you're going to do me a favor and simply raise your hand on Zoom so that I know who has questions, and then I will call on you guys in that order that you raised your hand. All right. So thank you very, very much, everyone, for being here. So we have Venice, Florida, Miami, Florida, which is where I am as well. We got Tammy from New York, but now she's in Colombia. Wow. Okay. Sherry is on the treadmill in San Diego. Yes. Anne is, of course, Atherton Tablelands. Yes. Far North Queensland, Australia. And so it's the next day for Anne. So thank you very much, Anne. What time is it by you?
Yeah, it's just after 10 o'clock on Thursday.
AM.
Yeah.
Right,
10 a.m.
right.
Thursday. So we're a few hours ahead.
Okay, awesome. And then, well, we got a lot of people from Florida here. Wow. And of course, Brianna's from Orlando. Thank you so much, Brianna, for being here. Okay, so we are going to get started. I collected some questions from people before this, but if anybody here has questions for Anne, you can type it into the chat or you can raise your hand and ask her live. So something you need to know, Anne has been fruitarian for, correct me if I'm wrong, 32 years?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 32 years. And so, well, my first question, Anne, is wondering, do you have your own fruit farm? Because so many people have told me that you do. Do you have your own fruit farm?
Yes, and it's in construction kind of thing. So we moved to a place in far north Queensland, which is very sort of conducive to growing fruit. So it has a good climate all year round. It has a wide range of food crops that can grow here as well. We're subtropical. We're in the tropical latitude, but because we're high elevation, we're actually subtropical. So we can't grow durians and rambutans, but if you go down the hill about 40 minutes in a car, you can get to the durian and you can get to the rambutans. But I always thought if I moved to far north Queensland, it would be the true tropics. But I really love it here. I think the high elevation is just very, very healthy. The air is really fresh. And we can grow all of the subtropical fruits, just not some of the really tropical ones like mangosteen and rambutan and durian. So when we moved here, it was already quite established as a food forest, but we're just planting more and more trees. It takes a lot. So you don't realize, I think we've got about 3 acres and I had about half an acre before. And you don't really realize until you've got a property of 3 acres, how much work it takes, which was like one of the reasons for leaving working for the Woodstock Fruit Festival was because I'm full-time. Sometimes it's just 6 hours a day watering just to make sure everything gets water, not so much in the wet season, but certainly in the dry season. And it's such a joy. I find it really, really healthful on all levels to be gardening most of the day, that connection with the earth, the physical work. So moving hoses around is really good resistance work because you're pulling these hoses and they're trying to pull against you, and digging, weeding, being outside in the fresh air, not really needing to sunbathe in the same way because when you're outdoors, you're gardening and you're getting your sun in that way. So yes, working towards self-sufficiency. There's a lot of variables. You see the flowers on a mango tree. So our mango trees are in flower at the moment. but there's a lot that goes on between the flowering and actually picking the fruit. There's a lot of things, the weather, if it goes too cold at night, it can denature the pollen. If it gets too wet, the baby fruits can go moldy. If it's too dry, they can dry out. So really, it's not just a question of planting fruit trees and thinking, yes, I'm going to get all this fruit. It's a long road, but a very enjoyable one. So that's really, I do a bit of online coaching as well. I do some environmental campaigning, but the vast majority of my time at the moment is, growing fruit and planting trees. And it just feels wonderful. I really enjoy it.
And wow, that's incredible. And what percentage is the fruit that you eat from you? Like, what would you say the percentage is?
It varies. Sometimes it's 100%. If we have
Wow.
bananas and if we have chocolate sapote and some of the berries, there's been days when I've eaten everything from the land, which feels amazing. It really feels very satisfying. There's other times when it's sort of like 5%, when things aren't in season. There's a lot of baby trees here. So in 3 or 4 years, they'll be having crops, hopefully, but it's waiting to get to that stage. I'm fortunate that there is a local delivery service that delivers local fruit from the Atherton tablelands that delivers to my door, which has been really, really helpful, and it's very seasonal. So I supplement with that. I go to local farmers markets as well when I can. So eating a variety of fruit, but definitely working towards that almost everything from the land, but it is a bit of work in progress at the moment, but enjoyable.
Oh, that's the dream. And you're literally living our dream. And one day you will be self-sufficient. And I just love the way you say bananas. I just love the way you say it. Okay. So I'm going to say bananas. I'm just saying it from now on. Forrest has a question. First of all, I want to say, Forrest, thank you so much for being here. And I love your name. I love your name, Boo. So you can unmute and ask Anne anything at all.
Okay, cool. Hi guys.
Hi, Forrest.
Thank you, Anne, for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, my question is kind of two parts. So one, I was wondering, like, do you take into consideration like your cycle and being a woman, like hormonally, in terms of like what you eat in specific parts of the month? And then do you have recommendations for like women healers who have like written books? Like, I know a lot of the books that I've read are written by men, and while the information is very valid and helpful, I'm not a man, so my body works completely different, and I just would like information from women who have gone through this with this diet and kind of like attached it to being a female.
Yeah, thank you very much for your questions. The first thing about cycles is that I'm 57 now, and I've recently gone through menopause, so I don't actually have a cycle as such anymore. When I did get my period, I found that often I wasn't hungry. And I think women vary. I think everybody's an individual, and it's really important to remember that, because I know some women say they want to eat a lot when they have their period. For me, it was I'd eat much more lightly when I had my period, and I'd feel better doing that. So, yeah, I think there is a variation with our cycles, and I think it's really important to embrace the female cycle. I think it's really nice. Sometimes my cycle would line up with the moon. So I would, maybe have my period on the full moon and be fertile on the new moon. Sometimes it was the other way around. And I think it's very important to eat for your needs. Maybe if you have very heavy periods, you may need to look at the more iron-rich fruits to sort of supplement that. I also think, from my own personal experience, that orange-fleshed fruits are very, very good for the female cycle. So I think the orange-fleshed melons, I think papaya, I think mamey sapote, something about them I think is very nourishing and helps females to have a good cycle. I think the endocrine cycle is really vital to our health and well-being, and many, many people have issues with their endocrine cycle. And hormones are such a tiny little secretion, and yet they have such a huge effect on people, and especially women. A lot of women get certain symptoms just before their period starts. and the rest of their cycle, they are fine. And they almost have a change in personality. And that's how important these hormones are. And from all the reading and all the research I've done, the best way that I found to have a healthy endocrine system, which includes our female cycle, is to have a natural diet and lifestyle. So diet's a huge part of it. I think the more natural our diet is, the easier our female cycle will be, and the less pains we will have, the lighter our periods will be. And I think it's also important to listen to your individual needs within that, which I've touched on. For myself, I would feel better eating more lightly when I was bleeding. I know other women say, oh, I think I feel better if I have more during that period. So I think the individual needs are very, very important. And it's not just diet. I think there's other things that are very, very important to ensure a healthy female cycle. One of those is vitamin D. Vitamin D, if we look at the chemical structure of vitamin D, it's very similar to cholesterol. It's more like a steroid than a vitamin in the way of vitamin B or vitamin C. And it has a real effect, I believe, on our immune system and our hormonal system. And so many people these days are vitamin D deficient because we've been told to avoid the sun at all costs. And yes, we have to respect the sun. We don't want to burn in the sun. We don't want to get too much sun. But people have often gone the other way. And I think it's really important to test your vitamin D levels, especially if you're living in a less sunny climate, and look at the alternatives if you work indoors and you're just not able to get outdoors to get enough vitamin D, and then consider getting a spurty vitamin D lamp or taking a vegan supplement. So I think that vitamin D is very, very important in terms of our endocrine system. The other things is getting fresh air, exercising. I think exercising is very important, and doing an appropriate amount of exercise to have a healthy endocrine system, and also sufficient rest and sufficient sleep. With myself, I went through menopause, and the only symptom I had was that my period stopped. And you hear all this thing about menopause is a terrible thing. You've got this perimenopause for like 3 years before, and then 5 years afterwards, you're going to have like 10 years of just horror and hot flushes and mood swings and low energy and all these other things. And for me, I haven't had any of those symptoms, well, so far. And I really do think it's because of my diet and lifestyle. And I think that's not to say that every woman on a diet and lifestyle similar to me would have a symptomless menopause, but I think it's possible. And I've met other raw food vegans that have had the same. They've just gone through menopause with no appreciable symptoms. So I think, that diet and lifestyle is very important for managing our female cycles, and for, when we do go through menopause, sailing through menopause, not seeing it as this huge, awful thing that's going to happen to us for years and years and years, and it's going to really depreciate the quality of our life. Because I do believe we don't have to go through that if we're treating our body and our endocrine system in the way that it needs to be treated. And the second part of your question, you asked about books. I don't really know any specific books about females and their cycles on a raw food diet. There was a little pamphlet that I read years ago called "Is Menstruation Really Necessary?" I think it was actually by Nadine Forrest and somebody else. And it was published in the 80s. I haven't been able to find another copy of it. I'm not sure if it's online, but that was very, very interesting, because that was talking about how some females stop bleeding when they're on a raw vegan diet. And I believe that some possibly do. I never did. I always had a bleed, and I tend to think that was because my periods were very, very heavy before I was on a raw fruit diet. So they never were going to disappear completely. But there are other women that have had a cessation of their bleeding but are still fertile. And I think that's the important thing, because your periods can stop for various reasons. And one of them is that your body is not in a condition to get pregnant. You've got too low body fat, or you've got some health challenges. And then your body's very sensible. You're not in a place to conceive and carry a baby, so your periods will stop. But other women, I do believe their periods can stop and they're still ovulating. And I think a way to test that would be, you can get ovulation tests, hormonal tests, to see if you're ovulating or not. And if you're ovulating, but you're not bleeding, it still means that you've got a cycle. But if your periods stop and you're not sure, it could be because you're undergoing some health challenges and you're not in a place to conceive. So I would really recommend a high or an all raw diet to help with the female cycle. Now, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, totally. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Anne. So we got a question. How did you eat before you became a fruitarian? How did you grow up eating?
Well, I grew up eating a very standard British diet. I was raised in the UK, but it was relatively healthy because my dad had an allotment, which is a British term for a piece of land. You rent a piece of land and you grow all your fruits and veggies, because in England, a lot of the gardens are quite small. So we always had, just about all year round, even in the winter, there were some Brussels sprouts or some cabbages. So we had fresh produce, and my mother always cooked from scratch. So even though it was a standard omnivorous diet in many ways, we never had takeaways. We never had burgers, never had, Kentucky Fried Chicken. We had meat, we had animal products, but it was all cooked from scratch with a lot of fresh produce from my dad's allotment. So I grew up, I would say, relatively healthy. And then you get to sort of the teenage years where you're eating more junk, more processed foods. And quite early on, I discovered about health and diet. So from about the age of 20, I really started to refine my diet, and that was part of my journey towards the fruit diet. So growing up, probably from 0 to 14, relatively healthy omnivorous diet with few processed foods, but then teenage years, more processed food, until I discovered the connection between what we eat and how we feel when I became vegan at the age of 20. And then from then on, it was a bit of a journey. I tried Anne Wigmore, wheatgrass, a lot of sprouts, raw diet. I tried macrobiotic vegan diet, which was a lot of cooked, and I tried a whole food vegan diet, and gradually refining my diet until when I discovered the fruit diet, it was like a no-brainer. It just ticked all the boxes. I felt the best on it. And I've been on fruit diet, yes, since I was 24 now. So, yeah.
Wow. Wow. Thank you so much. I never heard you say a Kentucky Fried Chicken either. I never heard you say that before. I can't, but you never ate fast food, right? Like,
No,
yeah,
not growing up.
really
No.
good.
And I think probably had one burger in the whole of my life before I
Wow.
became vegan, because we never had takeouts. It was always home cooked food. So, but I don't think I missed anything.
No, definitely not. So, Lori, you can unmute yourself, and thank you so much for being here, Lori. Oh, wait, you're still on mute. I mean, well, it says you're unmuted, but we can't hear you. So maybe there's a headphones connected, or not yet. Maybe you need to put in headphones, or maybe, oh, maybe your computer is muted. I've seen that before, where the computer's muted but Zoom is not. Okay, so thank you so much, Lori. So she wrote her question in the chat, which is, Anne, do you grow any vegetables or greens? And do you eat any vegetables or greens?
I don't grow any vegetables or greens, although I've thought about growing some potatoes because my husband is vegan, but not raw. And so I have thought about it, but I haven't really got the passion for it. And my husband says, I want to be fruitarian. So he's like more into planting fruit trees. So no, I very, very rarely eat greens or vegetables. Sometimes my husband works away a lot. So when he's home, I'll get vegetables in, I'll get greens in, and I will cook them for him. And occasionally when I'm prepping it, I might taste a little bit of spinach, very occasionally. But it's very rare. When he's not here, there's no well, there are vegetables in the house for the wallabies. So we have the rock and the swamp wallabies come every day for food, and they love carrots. So I do have carrots in, but I don't eat them. But having said that, if I got a desire to eat greens, I would eat greens. And there was one occasion that I did get a desire to eat greens since I've been on a fruit diet very strongly. And a friend, I don't know if I should say a friend, but anyway, somebody gave me a mushroom. Now, normally I'm very, very careful about mushrooms. I know that there are a lot of mushrooms that are toxic. And they said, this is a parasol mushroom. It's fine to eat. And I should have checked more, because actually it was a fake parasol mushroom, otherwise known as the vomiter mushroom. And I think I vomited about 40 times in 4 hours. It was pretty horrible. And apparently, if somebody goes into hospital vomiting a lot, they will say, did you eat any mushrooms? Because this is a mushroom that grows in the States as well as Australia and various other places. And luckily, it was just, it's not a long-term damage one. It was just once you've vomited it out, that's it. But the next day, I got a real desire to eat greens. And I think something had happened with that mushroom. There was something in the greens that I needed. So I went and ate purslane. I'd got purslane growing wild in the garden. I ate it, and then I was satisfied. So I think if there was a reason I needed to eat greens, or if I couldn't get good quality fruit, then I would definitely eat greens. I feel better generally with fruit, but I'm not close to eating greens if I needed to. If I couldn't get good quality fruit and I could get good quality greens, I would consider eating them, or if I desired them. And I think it's a decision that people need to make for themselves. A lot of people feel better including a small amount or even a large amount of greens. And I think you need to go with what your body's telling you. When it's a raw food, then the signals are clear. If your body's telling you, oh, I want some candy or I want some chips, then there's mixed messages there, because these foods have excitotoxins in, they have addictive properties. But if it's like a raw fruit or vegetable that's edible for humans, then I think go with your cravings. So did that answer your question?
Yes, she said yes. Thank you so much, Anne. I have a question. I mean, it's so confusing, because there's so many conflicting, people on the internet that are saying we need greens, we need this, we need that. So it's a little confusing, but I wanted to ask you about nuts and seeds. I know you don't consume them, but I'm curious, do you think that they are, just in your opinion, do you think that they're safe to consume? Do you think they're toxic for the human body? Do you think they're human food, nuts and seeds?
I don't tend to think they're a staple for humans. I think for some people, they can be useful as a transition. I think a lot of people, when they start doing this diet, lose a lot of weight. Not everybody, some people put on weight, but a lot of people coming from a more sort of standard diet go onto a fruit-based diet and lose a lot of weight. I think in such cases, nuts and seeds can have a place. I would recommend getting organic ones, making sure they're raw. A lot of nuts are heat dried, but you can get ones that are raw. Soaking them, I think, helps with digestion. Some nuts, like macadamia nuts, if you live where macadamia nuts grow, new season macadamia nuts are a lot easier to digest. They have more water content, they're less fatty, they almost taste like a bit like a young coconut in the flavor of them. So I think they can have a place. Personally, for me, I don't eat them, only occasionally. If I make a raw fruitarian cake, I will put raw macadamia nuts in, but I will soak them before I put them in the cake. And that would be just a couple of times a year. I just find that if I want more fattier foods, I do better with young coconut flesh, with durian, or with avocados. And so I tend to avoid nuts and seeds. Some people find them useful. Some people find them useful for the nutrients in them. Maybe if they've got a limited supply of good quality fresh fruit, but they can access good quality organic nuts and seeds, then, that may be a useful addition to their diet. I always think that individual needs are very, very important. When I started on this diet, I did eat nuts and seeds. After I adjusted to the diet and found that I assimilated my food a lot better, which was after a 52-day mono orange juice diet, I no longer found a need to eat nuts and seeds. I found that I could maintain my weight really well just eating juicy fruits. So I think it's, I don't think there's one answer that's right. If they're serving you well, if you don't seem to have digestive issues with nuts and seeds, if you don't overeat them, because that's another thing. Some people will start on a bag of nuts and they'll eat more than their body can deal with. Then they may have a useful place. I think ultimately they're not really human food because they have toxins in that we need to soak the nuts often to get those toxins out. And in nature, we wouldn't find a whole bag of nuts. If you go to most nut trees, the squirrels or other creatures have got there before you, and it's hard to find, unless it's on a farm and it's all caged in, it's hard to find a lot of nuts in the wild. And then you've got creatures like squirrels that have a symbiotic relationship with the nut trees. So they take a lot of nuts, but they also forget where they buried a lot of them. So the squirrels do a really good job of spreading the seeds for the nut trees. So I think they have a symbiotic relationship, because really a plant or a tree doesn't want all its seeds eaten because it won't procreate. But in the case of the squirrels, I think that's a bit of an exception because they actually do help with the trees procreating.
Oh, wow. That makes a lot of sense. And thank you for going through that with us. Oh, I really appreciate that. It clarifies stuff for me. Dustin, do you have a question for Anne?
Sure. Well, first of all, Anne, thank you so much for recommending the book from Karen, How to Grow a Child on a Raw Vegan Diet. She was here just a second ago when my wife took her. So we have a 10-month-old that is completely raw and perfectly healthy, everything awesome. So thank you so much for that. The question is, I've done a lot of research and read a lot of books over the past decades. I've been on a raw vegan diet on and off. Mostly I would say that I consider myself raw till dinner. But I've never found any, for people like that don't have the luck of living in a fruit farm or having raw fruits nearby, good quality fruits nearby, and they have to rely on buying most of their fruits from grocery stores. Have you done any research on what is the amount of pesticides or chemicals that get into their fruits that are not grown? And considering that we buy most of, as much as we can, organic, but organic is, I think it doesn't have a lot of meaning on itself. It's surely better than non-organic, but I think it's just another marketing thing to sell. But the concern that I have is if you eat mostly raw, then your chances, I mean, you're getting more of the pesticides that are in fruits, if in fact they get into fruits. And I also know that if you eat a normal diet, most of any grain or any refined food is just a concentration of any pesticide that is used. But I just had that concern if you had a question, an answer to that.
I think that's a really good question and a really good concern. The issue with pesticides is they vary. I think you can look at like the clean 15 and the dirty dozen. I think that's a good generalization for which crops are sprayed more heavily and which aren't. But a real concern is with systemic pesticides and systemic chemicals, and these get into the flesh of the fruit. And one of these is bananas, and I've talked to a lot of banana farmers. I don't eat non-organic or non-sprayed bananas because of the systemic poisons. I have a real concern with that. I know a lot of people have bananas as their staple, but I have concerns with bananas that are not organic or are not unsprayed because of the systemic chemicals that get into the bananas. And so you can peel a banana, but the chemicals are in the flesh of the banana. And I think it was in Costa Rica, the government were even putting up posters telling people not to feed the monkeys bananas. And when I saw that, I thought, well, that's nuts. because monkeys eat bananas, don't they? And so I researched it, and this was over 10 years ago, and I researched it, and I found that it was particularly non-organic bananas that the concern was with. So I'm thinking it's not the bananas per se, but it's the chemicals. And these monkeys were having birth defects, stillbirths, and dental issues when they were fed a high amount of standard bananas. So bananas is one of the fruits that I don't eat unless it's locally grown and non-sprayed, or if it's organic, because of the systemic chemicals in it. And if I had $1 for every time someone had said to me, well, I peel a banana, it'll be fine, I would be very rich by now. But it's not the case. Peeling the banana does nothing to get rid of the systemic chemicals. And I think, you know, that bananas are one. Another fruit is strawberries. Strawberries are very heavily sprayed. Also, the ground that the bananas are grown in is sterile. Most of the time it's sterilized. And that is just, to me, totally against nature. And they use a lot of artificial fertilizers. And apples is a third one that I wouldn't eat unless it was organic or non-sprayed. They are often dipped. Even at farmers markets, I have to ask in Australia, are these apples dipped? A lot of the time they're dipped in chemicals to preserve them, and those chemicals go into the fruit. They don't just stay on the peel. So you can peel it, but they're actually in the cells of the apple. So there's some fruits that I won't eat unless they're non-sprayed or organic, and they're bananas, strawberries, and apples. But another thing that I think is hugely important for the reason to eat organic or wild or non-sprayed is what happens to the mycelium or the fungi in the soil when pesticides, when herbicides, and when fungicides are used in the soil. So what happens is the mycelium or the fungi in the soil are destroyed. And the fungi form a vital symbiotic relationship with the fruit trees. So fungi don't have leaves. They can't photosynthesize. So fruit trees have leaves. They can photosynthesize, which means they take in carbon dioxide in the presence of sunshine with water, and they create carbohydrates. So they create their own food. Now, because fungi don't have leaves, they can't do this. So the fruit trees actually pass carbohydrates onto the fungi. And what researchers are finding out now more and more is that we talk about the carbon sequestered in trees. Well, actually, a lot, tons and tons and tons of carbon is also sequestered in fungi. But the other part of this symbiotic relationship, which is important to nutrients, so the trees are passing on carbohydrate to the fungi. In return, the fungi are breaking down bonds in compounds. So, for example, calcium phosphate. Now, a tree can't break down those bonds, but the fungi can. So they break down those bonds to produce available calcium that the tree can then absorb. So what's happening when you're choosing produce that's grown with chemicals, those fungi in the soil are killed, and so there'll be less calcium, there'll be less of the other minerals in that fruit because the fungi aren't there to break down the bonds, so the tree can't assimilate those nutrients. And I think that's hugely important when we're relying, as you said, when we're relying on fresh produce for the majority of our nutrition. If we're getting fruits, and especially fruits, because it's this symbiotic relationship between the fruit trees and the mycelium, if we're getting fruit trees that are grown in areas that have been sprayed, they're not going to be as high in calcium and other minerals as well. And calcium is very, very important. So that for me is a really top reason to choose non-sprayed or organic. It's not about the actual pesticides, although that's a big thing because the pesticides can cause all kinds of issues in our gut biome and also in other areas of health, but it's the fact that that fruit is going to have more calcium in where it's grown in soil where the fungi are allowed to live and not killed, because it's not just fungicides that kill fungi, it's pesticides and herbicides as well. So I think it can vary a lot. Some types of fruit aren't sprayed as much. Go and look at the sort of like the clean 15 and the dirty dozen, and they do vary because farming practices vary. And if you can't get all organic, at least try and get the clean foods that are conventionally grown, and avoid those in the dirty dozen, because it's not just about the harm the pesticides are having on you, it's the fact that those fruits will not contain as much calcium, which I think is vital for health. It's a really important mineral. So did that answer your question?
Yes, yeah, thank you. And I had a quick follow-up if I can.
Of course.
Yeah. So two things, actually. I thought about another one. Coconuts, because one of the reasons why I moved to Florida, South Florida, was to get fresh coconuts, although they're not as good as Thai coconuts, but still it's good water. Do coconuts take up a lot of things that are sprayed nearby? They spray everything here. I mean, one of the reasons why I'm thinking of moving away from Florida is they spray everything, pesticides, herbicides, everything. And I'm originally from Europe. We're not used to this, so I'm really considering moving away, but unfortunately. The second question is, does it make sense to buy fruits? I'm talking fruits like tomatoes that are grown in a greenhouse rather than grown in the field. Does it even make sense to eat those fruits? Because I know it's still good water, but there's basically nothing left in these, or even like lettuce they grow lettuce in containers now. Does it make sense to eat that fruits? Thank you.
Yeah, I think with coconuts, when they're left, I mean, if you get coconuts from Thailand, they're mostly organic anyway. You'll get some certified. Coconuts aren't generally sprayed because they're so high up and they're so like tough. Nothing's really going to get into a coconut unless a monkey goes up there. But whether they absorb, I do not know.